The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Minneapolis Committee of the Whole will now begin.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Jenkins, and I am the Vice Chair of the Committee of the Whole. And I'm going to call to order our regular committee meeting for Thursday, May 27th. Chair Ellison is on official city business and not able to be with us this morning. I would like to note that for the record, this meeting has remote participation by council members and city staff as authorized under the Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Section 13D.021, due to the declared state of local public health emergency. I will also note that the city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel. This meeting is public and subject to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Reich.
Here.
Councilmember Gordon.
Here.
Fletcher is absent. Councilmember Cunningham.
Present.
Councilmember Osmond. Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Cano. Councilmember Bender.
Here.
Councilmember Schrader.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Present.
One more time, Councilmember Osmond. Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Cano. Jenkins. Vice Chair Jenkins.
Here.
Members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. Colleagues, we have 3 items on today's agenda in addition to our regular standing committee reports. Presentation number 1 is the federal, update on the federal legislative activities from the office of our esteemed Congresswoman U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar. At this time, I am honored to invite Representative Omar to begin.
Thank you, Vice President Jenkins. Thank you all for welcoming me to your meeting. I'm excited to get a chance to give you an update on my work in Congress and answer any questions you might have. A lot has happened in our nation and in our city since I was with you a year ago. First, we endured months of quarantine due to COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses were shattered. Many of us, including myself, lost loved ones. And then just days after we last met, Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd in broad daylight in front of a child. Throughout the difficult times in the last year, I've drawn inspiration from what we have built together. A global movement towards racial justice was launched right here in our city. While this has been inspiring, it also puts a great deal of responsibility on each of us as leaders. In Washington, we are pushing to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. My office is also drafting a letter to the Department of Justice regarding the pattern and practices investigation into MPD. We will be encouraging justice to expand the scope of inquiry to include other nearby jurisdictions where people of color have been killed by the police. I have also proposed the creation of a National Police Misuse of Force Investigation Board Act. This bill will establish a federal agency responsible for investigating all nationwide deaths occurring in police custody officer-involved shootings, and uses of force that result in severe bodily injury. And finally, I introduced my bill to criminalize police violence against protesters. This legislation would allow any officer who kills or causes bodily harm to civilians during the response to a protest to be charged with a federal crime. We must ensure that the constitutional right to protest is duly protected and not threatened or stifled by law enforcement officers. For example, this legislation would come into play in the case of the officer who chose to pepper spray out the window of a police cruiser at peaceful protesters last summer. Discipline against officers has been slow and lacking in public transparency. My bill will fix that. I know the biggest thing on your mind is likely fiscal recovery funds passed under the American Rescue Plan. Not only will the American Rescue Plan cut child poverty in half, it provides much needed financial relief to Minnesotans, but it also provides funds to state and local governments who have been hit extremely hard by this pandemic. And as you know, the city of Minneapolis is due to receive $280 million. In addition, Hennepin County will receive $240 million, while the state has received over $2 billion more, and $500 million of which is now solely in the discretion of the governor. Recently, the U.S. Department of Treasury finally released their interim final rule on how the funds will be distributed and what it could be used for. Treasury also released guidance on what these funds can be utilized in our communities for. My team has provided a written fact sheet and guide in advance so you can review what is eligible as you weigh how to use these funds. Here's what these funds are eligible for. Support public health expenditures by funding COVID-19 mitigation efforts, medical expenses, and behavioral health care, and certain public health and safety staff. It can also be used to address negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency, including economic harms to workers, households, small businesses, impacted industries, and the public sector. It could be used to replace lost public sector revenue, using these funds to provide government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue experienced due to the pandemic. It could be used to provide premium pay for essential workers, offering additional support to those who have borne and will bear the greatest health risks because of the service in critical infrastructure sectors. And it can be used to invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, making necessary investments to improve access to clean drinking water, support vital wastewater and stormwater infrastructures, and to expand access to broadband internet. Our communities need this support now. These funds should be distributed as quickly as possible to those who need them most. While stock prices soared and wealth accumulated in the hands of fewer and fewer people, businesses have been shattered, people are without work, and what little work they can find pays less and less. Many of the biggest corporations right here in Minneapolis have prospered during the last year, while many of our constituents are struggling to get by. As the representative of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, I'm committed to making sure those funds end up helping the most vulnerable among us get back on their feet and find footing in this economy. I support spending these dollars on programs like creating Universal Basic Income Pilot Program, extension of our Universal Meals Access Bill, free after-school care in our parks, full-time service community schools with wraparound services, right to counsel for renters facing eviction, and a Minneapolis Green New Deal. We need to get these dollars in people's hands right away. That's why I support a pilot program for Universal Basic income here in Minneapolis, similar to what our neighbors have piloted in St. Paul. I don't have to tell you how important it is for us not to allow St. Paul to embarrass us. As you know, early in the pandemic, I passed the Meals Act to provide free meals to young people. I'm proud to report that the USDA has extended our bill multiple times, and it is currently extended to the end of the 2022 school year. As far as I'm concerned, there is no reason a student in Minneapolis public schools should ever have to pay for school lunch again. This is something that we can do as a city together. My office is inquiring about the cost of providing free childcare in our parks, which will also provide jobs to young people. I also support the right to counsel for tenants facing eviction. After meeting with you all last year, we created our eviction moratorium and housing task force at the suggestion of Councilmember Alondra Cano. We've been successful in pushing for aid to renters, but we also need to provide them with the legal support they need to negotiate with their landlords. Otherwise, the grant program will just become a giant subsidy to corporate property owners. A few weeks ago, I got to see resilient response Brooklyn Center residents have had since the killing of Dante Wright. Much of the food that was being distributed out of their full-service community school hub. I encourage us in Minneapolis to build out a network of full-service schools and parks with wraparound services, because I know we can do it as well. We also need to fund a Green New Deal in Minneapolis, something my task force will discuss again later this week. In talking to Minneapolis school educators and administrators, internet access was one of the many barriers many of our constituents faced last year. We have the resources now to permanently close the broadband access gap. Creativity is especially stated as the purpose of the rescue plan funds. In total, we have the ability to make a $1 billion investment in our city. Right now, this is a tremendous opportunity. Monday, I joined Councilmember Jeremiah Allison and Representative Esther Abaje in North Minneapolis to articulate these priorities. Now is the time we can join together and connect low-income families to the internet, provide universal school meals forever, and launch a Minneapolis Green New Deal, spearhead a universal basic income pilot, provide free after-school programs in our parks, expand full-service community schools. These are the investments our communities are desperately looking for. But I don't have all the answers. None of us do. Last week, I met with the city of Edina, and they are kicking off a public engagement effort to steer the spending of their federal dollars. I encourage Minneapolis to do the same. Our office will also be soliciting input throughout the month of June on how these dollars should be spent. We will be releasing more information in the coming weeks. I also hope to see the city match these federal dollars with city-level investments. The era of atrocities is over. Our legacy is not to be defined by what happened a year ago. It will be defined by what we do now and how we respond. In order not to repeat our mistakes, we have to quit doing things the same old way. Yesterday, I visited the George Floyd Square one final time. We dug a hole in the soil in the middle of 38th in Chicago and planted a small plant. Our city is ready for all the seeds we have planted to flourish. When I get discouraged, sometimes I think about the two women who have inspired me in the last year. Minneapolis firefighter Genevieve Hansen and 911 dispatcher Jenna Scurry. They are heroes. These two female city employees who tried to intercede and save George Floyd's life. So while yes, one city employee is now in prison for killing him, let us also remember the two women who tried to save his life. I draw inspiration from Jenna, and Genevieve. We have within our city and within ourselves everything we need to solve our problems. We just have to start listening to the right people. And with that, I will conclude my remarks there and take some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Omar. That is a great report and encouragement and I think inspiration for the city and my colleagues to build upon. I do want to note that we have been joined by Council members Kano and Osman, and so let the record reflect that, and then I will invite my colleagues for comments and/or questions. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and great to see you, Congresswoman. I just had a question with all of the federal money coming in. I know that there's been a lot of talk about spending some of this on additional law enforcement, and I know that's been a lot of debate on, how do we transform public safety? So I did want to see if you had any insight into any additional requirements that would come with federal money, if there were to be used for law enforcement, such as accountability, such as supervision, and anything that is kind of currently being talked about on the federal as well as state level.
There's a lot of flexibility, and it's something that we fought for, so that there aren't a lot of restrictions on the ways in which municipalities and states and counties can utilize these funds. What I will say, council member, is that it is at the discretion of our municipality to decide what is a priority for our city and how these extra federal funds that we are receiving could be used to address some of the most devastating racial disparities that we have in our country. I think it is important, as I've laid out, for us to utilize these extra dollars that are coming into our city to help address those disparities in a more concrete, direct way.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I would, Council President Bender.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Congresswoman, so much for all of your advocacy for our community. And I just want to note that we've just had so much support and engagement from your office, from the task force that you mentioned that I know a number of council members have been able to participate in, that has a really wide table of folks throughout the community, and just your partnership through the IGR staff and committees as we navigate advocating for federal investments. So it's just really notable, and I want to highlight how engaged your office has been with the city. So thank you. I wondered if you could talk about the future of some of the other proposals, like the American Jobs Plan, and what we might be able to expect as far as infrastructure investments, especially as we consider our approach to the ARPA dollars. Kind of what's coming next, and where do you see the landscape for future federal investments?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Council President. We are currently working on a jobs and infrastructure legislation. Obviously, the president and the administration is pushing for a bold investment in these pieces of legislation. We are currently hearing that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have put out a proposal, a counter proposal that is matching only 13% of the federal dollars that the president is seeking, and that my colleagues, the Democrats, are supporting. And so the next few weeks are going to be crucial as we advocate and hope that you all will join us in raising your voices on the importance of having a bigger package, because we all understand just how desperate investments are needed in regards to infrastructure, not just the roads and bridges, but our care infrastructure as well. And so we'll continue to push for that. What we are hoping for is to have it be done by July. And then, we are also working on the federal budget as well. The president just proposed a really massive increase in the federal budget, and so there are prospects of having real investments in all of these pieces of legislation that we'll be pushing through. So I encourage you and your colleagues and the mayor to utilize the dollars that you have right now in doing really bold, creative things on behalf of our city, so that we can continue to show that as an example and advocate for more dollars when there is waste, when our communities aren't able to feel the investment. It makes it hard for us to advocate for more resources and more dollars to come into our community.
Thank you. Thanks for all your advocacy. I'll just say too, the Biden administration has also been incredibly collaborative with local governments. And I think we can see, a direct line between the conversations that we've been having at the local level. We all talk to our colleagues across the country, and we're facing a lot of similar challenges. We share ideas. And you can just see all of that showing up in the different federal agencies and the way they're approaching developing their programs and spending. So I feel like it is a place of hope and inspiration where we can see you and others carrying our message to Congress, to the federal government that has so much more resources, so much more leverage than all of us at the local level. We're often the first and last stop for folks who are in crisis, and to see their stories being shared within our federal government that has so much more power and resources is a place of hope for all of us, I think. So thanks for your strong role in advocating for that and to bring the voices of our constituents to a national stage.
Yeah, no, thank you. We all have to do the work on behalf of our shared constituency, and as I say to all of the municipalities when I present to them, you have more fluency into the day-to-day struggles of our constituency, and so it's really important for us to be in conversations constantly so that we can deliver the best services to them.
All right, well, I put myself in queue, and you talked about a task force or an investigation team that would look into all police involved killings throughout the country. I'm wondering, and certainly in reference to 38th in Chicago that you mentioned, which is the area that I represent, and there's 24 demands that have been made. One of those demands is to reopen and look at past police involved shootings. Will the task force that you're creating, the commission, be looking at past police involved killings as well? Do you anticipate that?
Yes, it is. our intention that it would retroactively investigate, but it would also proactively investigate. I think right now, with the way that the DOJ is set up, it is an invitation or a national outcry that brings them into a municipality to look at the pattern and practices. And so with this national board that we are pushing for, that is just their job. They investigate and make recommendations, and they will have the responsibility of withholding federal resources from municipalities if those municipalities don't take the recommendations and make changes within their policing and justice system as well.
Wow, thank you. Our next question comes from Council Member Gordon.
Thank you so much. And actually, I think my questions have been answered. I just want to pile on the praise. I think your connection to us and being here today and so consistently in your office is deeply appreciated. And on behalf of all the constituents that I serve in the second ward, I just want to thank you for the work you're doing in Washington too. Some of the initiatives you're pushing forward there will have direct positive impacts on the people of Minneapolis. So appreciate that, appreciate the partnership. You know the city so well, and you're able to represent us so effectively. And I don't often do this, but I just wanted to pile on a little bit of praise and thank you so much for the work in your office.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Really appreciate it.
All right, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll pile on the praise as well. I wanted to specifically call out and recognize the Congresswoman's work around the earmarks process and the incredible projects that are so needed within the community that her advocacy, her work and leadership is getting funding for. And those projects include bus rapid transit, a pedestrian bridge, rebuilding a healthcare clinic, affordable housing, fire protection upgrades, a food entrepreneur incubator, even workforce training centers, both for our Latinx community and around clean energy careers. And so it's a really impressive list. It's clear that there was a lot of thought put into how to really utilize this opportunity to make our city a better place for all residents and address a lot of the disparities and inequities that we see, the most pressing within our city, and helping community. And it was really wonderful to see. And I know it was also a mad scramble with that. Things moved very quickly, and your office has been a steady rock through those turbulent waters happening out there in Washington, D.C. And as always, really appreciate the partnership. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. We are not calling it earmarks. They're community projects now, and I think it was really hard for us in so many ways because we got over 200 requests from our community to make proper investment. And I think it is just another example of why I so often talk about just the desperation of resources that exists in the Minnesota Fifth, and how important it is for us to collaborate together and address some of these critical funding gaps so that we can be able to provide and fight for all the resources that are out there so that our communities can have everything it deserves.
And I would just express my gratitude and thanks for the inclusion of the Sabanthony Community Center with a new roof as one of those community projects that is also made that list. So yeah, in the piling on, just thank you for all the critical support, the voice that you have created. I have long been advocating for green jobs in our city and universal basic income. Certainly support free lunch for our students, and really ensuring that we can make sure that communities are fed. You know, maybe our approach to affordable housing needs to be reevaluated. Maybe we need to help people afford the housing as opposed to putting money in developers' pockets, as you stated, around building. So if we have any other comments or questions, we'll be happy to take them. I'm sure the Congresswoman will be happy to respond, and then otherwise we will continue on with our agenda. Council Member Osmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take time to also thank Councilmember Representative Ilhan Omar. Thank you so much for your fight, and we are behind you 100%. And just want to thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Congresswoman. Thank you for your continued partnership, for continuing to show up and keep us informed on your activities and what's happening in our nation's capital. It's a lot right now. It's amazing. The administration's approach so far has been really to, I think, address the needs of the individuals in our country. And I think we're going to start to see some really positive benefits from that approach. And look forward to continuing to work with you in the future on behalf of our shared constituents. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right. I will, seeing no further discussion, direct the clerk to file that report. And I know that my colleagues and I myself will be continuously looking at these recommendations and trying to be creative in how we can implement these recommendations. Item number 2 on our agenda is a report relating to the economic impact study of the city's minimum wage ordinance. And I believe that report will be introduced by Renee Youngs from the city coordinator's office. Ms. Young.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jenkins and members of the committee. My name is Renee Youngs. I'm a policy and research management analyst in the city coordinator's office. I have the pleasure of being the contract manager for this project. This is a study that's being conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis on our behalf. I will be giving just a brief presentation update on the status of this project, and then I will be available to stand for any questions, as will one of the lead researchers who's joining us by audio. Dr. Anusha Nath from the Federal Reserve Bank is here. If you should have any questions that are too technical for me about the study itself in particular. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So first, very briefly, some background on the project overall. As you're all well aware, the city adopted a minimum wage ordinance in 2017 that set forth steps for gradually increasing the minimum wage for workers and firms in the city to $15. The current wage rates this year, for large firms, the wage is currently $13.25 per hour. That will increase on July 1st of this year to $14.25. For small firms, the hourly wage is currently $11.75 per hour, and that will increase to $12.50 on July 1st. just so you have a sense of where we are in the multiple steps of implementing the ordinance. In 2018, the city contracted with the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis to study this stepped increase all the way to $15 per hour in the minimum wage. This is a really exciting, unprecedented, to my knowledge, still project, even though it's several years underway now. And it should hopefully tell us and policymakers all around the country a lot about some unresolved questions and questions that have gotten a lot, I think, of political or non-data driven reasoning and statements around them. But this study will give us some empirical evidence that will answer some of the unresolved questions about what a minimum wage increase of this magnitude does to a local economy. So the scope of our contract with the Federal Reserve includes annual reports that will primarily look at effects of the increase on workers and on the firms that employ them. You might recall in recent months, this contract has been amended to increase the length of the contract period. That's because we have some limitations on how long a contract can initially be set for, and we always knew that we wanted this contract to extend beyond, up to and beyond the year of full implementation of the ordinance, in order to be able to study change at every step of increases along the way, and also to get sort of a post condition, a new baseline of economic conditions after full implementation of the ordinance. So that is the context that I'm bringing you. I'll ask for the next slide, please. This next slide, talking about data sources, is not new information. You saw, in fact, this exact same content the last time I was here in March of 2020. But just to refresh your memory about some of the questions we hope this study will help us answer. We're hoping that data from the state's Department of Employment and Economic Development will tell us something about how much workers are earning and from what employer. So for instance, we're curious, are workers earning more overall? Are workers facing reduced hours or picking up additional jobs because of pressure on their employers, on firms? The Fed folks will be using data from the state's Department of Human Services to tell us about whether workers are accessing public sector benefits more or differently. So for instance, are workers being laid off because of pressures on firms from the increased minimum wage? Or do workers experience sort of a benefits cliff effect in which they earn more in their wages and then lose access to public assistance? We're hoping to understand whether, when, and if those things are happening. And then finally, data from the State Department of Revenue, we hope will tell us a little bit about whether firms' payroll costs are changing and how those payroll costs compare to their revenue and their sales. So, for instance, are profit margins tighter for businesses now than they were in prior years? Or do revenues increase if more wages and more dollars are circulating in the local economy? There are a lot of research questions in here, but those are the kinds of things that the research team hopes to try and understand from all these different data sets. Next slide, please. So, what have we done since the spring of 2020? We have done some really, I say we as though this is my work. Our colleagues at the Federal Reserve and their colleagues at state agencies have done a lot of really important work that has moved very slowly because of being in a pandemic year. They were able together to finalize the security practices and protocols necessary and agree on those practices and protocols to allow the Federal Reserve Bank to host all of the data from the state agencies on site. As you can imagine, data about firms' payroll and individual benefit provision and all of those things are very sensitive and very secure data, rightly so, held by the state. And so there was a lot of negotiation and planning that went into just being able to get data in front of the research team. And that was further complicated by pandemic-related facility access and a number of other things that, if you're curious for more detail, perhaps Dr. Nath can answer questions in a few moments. They also were able to negotiate, finalize, and fully execute data sharing agreements to create the contractual framework to make the data sharing happen. Those two were complicated by the state agencies in particular needing to, rightly so, prioritize their pandemic-related emergency response work, and needed to be able to come back to these data sharing agreements and finalize them after that, particularly that rush of work in the middle 2 quarters of 2020. So all of those agreements have been fully executed now, I believe. And data sharing is underway. The Federal Reserve Bank research team is accessing data, reviewing samples, making sure that the data is clean for analysis, and the transfer of final cleaned and reviewed data sets is now underway. That's something that will be ongoing in this and subsequent years, but it is moving now. Next slide, please. You in a moment will see there a table. This is the most new and most concrete information of this update. This gives you a sense of when we expect the Federal Reserve team to access data from the 3 state agencies. And so it gives you a sense of what they will be analyzing and when, particularly their ability to access prior years of data. And then barring additional future crises or other complicating factors, we can anticipate that this sort of schedule of data availability will continue through the rest of the life of the project. So, for instance, for DEED, they are likely to be able to make data available for quarters 1 through 3 of any given year by the end of quarter 1 of the following year. They have a little bit of lag to make sure their own data is complete and clean and to their standards. And then 4th quarter data will follow after that. So it's on sort of a rolling cycle. Likely to have a similar lag and similar structure of availability for DHS data, although they plan to provide their data to the Federal Reserve folks on a monthly basis, I believe. So really, truly rolling. Department of Revenue data you see in this table will have quite a bit longer lag. That is because of the lag of firms reporting data to the Department of Revenue primarily. If any of you have ever filed an extension on your personal or business taxes or been part of a nonprofit board that requested an extension, you know that the ultimate extended filing deadline for Department of Revenue data can be a year or more from the end of the calendar year that's being reported on. So that then compounds similar lags in making sure within DOR that data are complete and clean and prepared and ready to transfer. So that's why you see these very long lags, particularly for the Department of Revenue, in making data available. Next slide, please. So all that said, we do have an anticipated timeline for what we are able to report and when. The next deadline for you all to note will be November 1st, 2021. We expect that to be the deadline for the Federal Reserve team delivering to us a combined report of years 1, 2, and 3 of analysis. That's for years 2018 to 2020. Because of the lag in Department of Revenue data that we were just talking about, that will be primarily a quantitative analysis using data from DEED and DHS to answer the questions that they are able to answer with the data available. They'll also be providing an update on qualitative analysis that they were able to conduct in 2020 The team had always, I believe, planned to wrap around the quantitative data with focus groups and interviews, getting perspectives directly from workers and firms about their experience. Because of pandemic conditions, that truncated their ability to do, I think, as much qualitative work as they were hoping to, but they have vowed to share what they have learned and what they were able to gather in that first report in November. So you will likely see my smiling face and hopefully also Dr. Nath's sometime early in 2022 to share that reporting. Then in following years, we expect to have a similar annual report for the remainder of the project. You see here on the slide reporting for years 4 through 8 and year 10. The gap in year 9 of the contract period is intentional because year 8 represents the first year of data availability for a year of full implementation of the ordinance, so the sort of immediate post condition. And then the final report will be a more long-term view, so several years after implementation, and it seemed more valuable to have those 2 time points spread further apart than to continue the annual longitudinal work at that point. And so the final project deliverable for this contract will be in October of 2028, if I or you or any of us can think that far ahead. That is the timeline that we're currently working on. That's everything I have to share. I and Dr. Nath from the Federal Reserve are available to stand for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Youngs. And I agree with you that this is still groundbreaking and exciting and really important work, though I think by the time we reach 15, we're going to need to be talking about a whole new goal. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Dr. Nath and thank Renee Youngs and thank Jeff, who preceded Renee Youngs in helping us to establish this project. You know, this really is an unprecedented project. The scope of this project being on the workers and the firms that employ them, to see how things change over time is really something that we didn't have as a city when we were going through. We didn't have good research and information when we were going through our own consideration of raising the minimum wage as a municipality. I want to say that I think we are so fortunate that the Federal Reserve has come in as our partners here. If you recall, I believe this was, I don't firmly recall, I think it was a budget amendment that we did in RFP, and then we were so excited and enthusiastic when the Federal Reserve came in and offered us the service for free, and had, you know, just a scope that really met our values and needs as a city. You know, to answer questions like, are people getting less hours because of this? Are profit margins lower? You know, those were things that were often insinuated at us during this conversation, but we didn't really know. We all read a lot of reports back in that time, and we've been having extremely detailed updates about this project over time in Enterprise Committee. We've had several people from the Federal Reserve come in and share with us. But I just want to point out for my colleagues that this is one way that we can contribute as Minneapolis to the greater good. And I think one of the ways that we can be impactful beyond our own city. Like, we really are contributing to the academic research on minimum wage here. And I just really want to share that appreciation and that resolve with my colleagues to continue forward, and to know how hard Renee Youngs is working for us at the city level, and Dr. Nath and and a team of others at the Federal Reserve. So thank you so much for being here.
Great. Are there any other comments? Council President Bender, and I do want to just confirm, would the doctor like to speak? I seemingly saw their thing light up.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Jenkins. I would like to thank Councilmember Palmisano for her effort and to bring this project, to execute this project. I don't think I have any other details other than what Renee has already presented. So if there are any other questions about other methods or other details, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
Thank you so much. Maybe Council President Bender has a question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just had a comment as well, just to say that I think this is an example of one of many areas where the city is really more proactively collecting data that we can use to inform policy decisions. And as you, Madam Chair, alluded to, I mean, often, resistance to policies that are designed to help those who are most vulnerable, are really based in assertions about the risks and benefits of change. And we often don't apply that same lens to the status quo, even though that we know that the status quo has led to dramatic racial disparities in every single aspect of our community's life. So having this rolling access to data in housing, in eviction disparities, having the Federal Reserve Bank also analyzing the impacts of our housing policies and that package of policies that we have worked together to pass in the last number of years, to have this economic data about workers and businesses, I think it will help us in the future really make policy decisions that are both informed and that are not so biased toward the status quo. When we passed the minimum wage, it was enormously controversial, and here we are all these years later, and still not going to be at $15 an hour until the year 2027. And again, a lot of that resistance was based on assertions that I guess we'll see as we go what the data is going to show. But again, we know the outcome of the status quo. We see it every day. Some boards more than others, of course. And so I just want to appreciate too the partnership that we have with the Federal Reserve Bank, not just on this topic, but on housing and a lot of the issues that our community and our region is really grappling with. And I think we see increasingly the suburban communities in our metro area grappling with many of the same issues. They don't have the same kind of capacity as far as staff and access to research that we are as fortunate to have. But I think the data that we're collecting is also helping to inform our regional trends and help support the communities throughout our region that are really working toward race equity and to address these disparities that we see in income and housing and other areas. So thanks for the opportunity to highlight that. And we just recently had a cool meeting about data and our city's use of data to inform policymaking. I think we've made huge strides in this area, and so many of the staff, both subject matter experts in the different departments, as well as folks throughout the enterprise, the coordinator's office and IT, have all been pitching in to really increase transparency and access to data, both for policymakers and for the public, in a way that I think is so exciting and so hopeful for the future.
Thank you, Madam President. Are there any other comments or questions from my colleagues? Any other discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I will direct the clerk to file that report. Thank you so much, Ms. Youngs, and we look forward to continuing updates on this project. Our next item, number 3, is a report on the guidelines for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And I do believe that that report will be introduced by Ms. Amelia Kruger from the Finance and Property Services Department. Oh, I just got notification that Council Member Ellison is either wanting to speak or Council President Bender will speak on his behalf. Council President Bender.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like I'm talking a lot in this meeting, but Councilmember Ellison asked me to share some summary of the conversations that we've had in this committee so far leading up to this informational presentation from staff. I hope I can do it justice. I think Councilmember Ellison's office actually has taken a lot of time to summarize the presentations that we've had at Committee of the Whole as they relate to the American Rescue Plan, and just asked me to go through and summarize a little bit of that information for background. So first, we heard from peer cities, as you might remember, talking with them about their plans for ARPA funding. Many of the cities that we had included in that presentation also are larger cities that had gotten CARES Act dollars directly, so they had some experience where we were working more in partnership with the county. So we were able to benefit from their experience there. And I'll note that I believe Councilmember Ellison's office will be sending a written summary of these conversations after this meeting. But some themes that Councilmember Ellison, Chair Ellison, wanted to highlight from the peer cities. We heard a lot about public engagement and participatory budgeting, cash assistance, and universal basic income. We heard from Denver that communities are voting directly on neighborhood scale transportation infrastructure, and that Seattle has allocated $30 million of their funds for a participatory budgeting process. Council Member Robin Kanich from Denver also noted and talked about their cash assistance program, talking about how they were implementing direct cash assistance to help struggling families, and she noted the efficiency of that approach. And then representatives from Seattle also noted that cash assistance has been really effective for helping immigrants and refugees who've been left out of other funding sources. From Austin, Councilmember Greg Kassar talked about how their cash assistance programs have outperformed their expectations. We also learned that the Denver Basic Income Project is giving basic income to individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and that the mayors of Denver and Seattle are part of a coalition of mayors who are working on the issue of guaranteed income. We also heard themes on priority areas related to childcare and youth, housing and homelessness, and workforce recovery. In Austin, early childhood centers are being planned for empty school buildings, and the city has a matching program with a philanthropic and private sectors that will house over 3,000 more people in the next 3 years. Seattle has used other relief funds to support their city employees, and they are implementing eviction preventions and expanding hotel shelter capacity. And I know that our staff are frequently talking to those from other cities, including, I'm sure, these, and probably are having a lot of those conversations at the staff level as well, sharing our experiences and learning from others. We heard then last time at COW from a panel of local experts. They all, despite being academics, moved very quickly. And so the chair asked for this summary to be shared of what we heard last time. So from the University of Minnesota panel, we heard themes around youth, homelessness, housing, and safety. From Dr. Ann Madsen, we heard that homelessness is an indicator of many other adversities that can harm child development, including poverty, maltreatment, violence, parental incarceration, foster care, and discrimination, all of which have dramatic racial disparities and exacerbate one another. From Dr. Ed Getz, we learned that severe housing instability for families has led to multiple families living together in homes meant for one family, also known as doubling up. and that extreme overcrowding has negative effects on children. Also that women with children may be exposed to abusive situations in order to get housing. Because there are often off-lease arrangements, tenant-landlord laws don't really exist, so the question was posed, could funding for court representation be useful in this kind of situation? Andre Dukes from the Northside Achievement Zone shared family surveys that indicated almost half of families feel less safe than since the murder of George Floyd. Direct interview quotes from their report include, quote, multiple shootings in the area. Kids don't feel safe outside or in the home. They are afraid of the police when they see them. And quote, just worrying about being killed with no justice. Doing right doesn't exclude us from harm. From Dr. Michelle Phelps, we heard that the North Minneapolis community feels underprotected and over-policed, exposed both to community and police violence. In her report of interviews with Northsiders from 2017 to 2019, one quote she provided to summarize what they had heard, quote, you can't go outside on the street or take your kids to the park without being harassed by the police. And when there was a serious crime like a shooting or a murder, they wouldn't show up. But any other day, they'll show up just to harass you and racially profile you. So, you know, I don't know if they're there to protect and serve. I don't feel that. I wouldn't call them for anything. Dr. Phelps' report recommended resources for safety beyond policing, reducing police misconduct, and empowering impacted residents to decide the future of public safety. So as we look forward to this presentation from staff today, this will be more of a technical presentation about eligibility for American Rescue Plan Act funds. I know that the chair is also planning, as we sort of zoom down, first having heard from cities around the country and then hearing from local experts on community needs, to then zoom in even more closely to our city and ask the question, how are we doing at the city enterprise level? Asking questions like, how can we effectively use rescue plan dollars to support our staff and what hurdles might we face? Are we currently meeting our operational goals and expressed values in our enterprise? If not, how can we get there? How have city employees fared through the crisis? Who's been impacted by layoffs, furloughs, and budgetary leave? Which departments have carried the most burden? How are these decisions made, and what can we learn going forward? And so as we sort of zoom in from other cities to community to then the city enterprise itself, I know Councilor Ellison is working for next cycle to have a presentation from staff on workforce data, things like demographics and retention, the issue of furloughs, and other sort of workforce issues that may support and inform decisions about this new round of ARPA funding, or this first round of ARPA funding. So as I said, I hope I've done justice to what Councilmember Ellison had planned to share when he learned he couldn't be here. The office asked me to share, and I know they plan to follow up with some written summary of the 2 presentations that we have had so far. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just curious if the report, the summary, had any information or context from residents concerned about intra-community violence or just general violence in our communities? Was that at any part of the presentations?
Yes, it looks like it was a significant part of a couple of the presentations, and so I believe that will be part of the written report. And then I know that that each of the presenters had to move very quickly and had offered to follow up. So I'm sure that through the chair of that committee, I know that we had been offered access to any presentations or research that they had shared. Mm-hmm. And I know that Dr. Lewis hadn't been able to join us. She has presented in the past at council meetings with her research which in the past has focused mostly on housing, but I know that she has expanded her research into the realm of safety as well, at least as far as I understand. So I'm not sure what she had planned to present about, but that may be another area of future, just gathering whatever information she had planned to share. And I think that is probably the extent of the questions that I could answer about what the chair had planned to present. So I wasn't involved in preparing the summary, but I know that Councilor Ellison, I'm sure, would be happy to answer other questions.
Oh, thank you. That was really great context and summary of the previous two committee of the whole. And so now we'll get this technical presentation from Ms. Kruber. How are you, Ms. Kruber? And welcome.
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you, Council Vice President Jenkins, and thank you, Council President Bender, for grounding us in all the work that you guys have done already, hearing about what other localities are doing and thinking about for the American Rescue Plan. What I'm hoping to accomplish today is to talk a little bit about the legislation as a whole. I have Director Fatima Moore from IGR here to talk about the legislation from a big high-level point of view, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what the guidance means specifically for Minneapolis, some of the work we've done already to prepare for decision-making around the American Rescue Plan dollars, and I also have our Deputy CFO, Lori Johnson, here to help answer any questions. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to start by talking about big picture. What is the American Rescue Plan? What were the goals of this legislation? Talk about the Treasury guidelines, which were released last week and we've been digging into, and then end with some discussion about what that means in Minneapolis, what work has staff done to date to prepare, and what our next steps look like. So go ahead and go to the next slide, and then I will invite Director Moore if she's here.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Fatima Moore, and I am the Director of the Intergovernmental Relations Department with the City of Minneapolis. As was noted, and I will first say that Congresswoman Omar did a lot of what I was intending to do and provide with this preliminary, really high level background of the Treasury guidance and where we are at the moment around understanding what the guidance says, as well as what we hope to get more information on from the Treasury. So with that, I'll begin. As you all know, the American Rescue Plan Act was passed in March of this year. And as a part of that bill was a coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund. That provision in the bill provided $350 billion in direct aid to cities and local governments, tribal entities, states, etc. The coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund was distinctly different from aids that local governments received when the CARES Act dollars was passed last year. There was a lot of advocacy to ensure that local governments were able to receive funding directly to them without having to go through their legislature, as we did when we received our portion of the CARES Act dollars last year. So, you know, lots of advocacy. Again, thank you to Congresswoman Omar and to our congressional senators as well for collaborating with us on hearing some of our experiences and then pushing extremely hard to ensure that this provision ultimately passed in the American Rescue Plan Act. The intent of the, I'll call it now, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund is to help respond to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's to help with things like revenue shortfalls, support communities and populations that were hardest hit by the COVID-19 crisis. There is a massive emphasis on both the connection to COVID and use of these funds, as well as the inequitable experiences of communities who were already struggling even prior to COVID, but because of COVID, are again feeling the acute impact of the pandemic. These funds are available May 2021 through December 26. There is a clear distinction that these funds need to be obligated, by 2024, so not 2026. They need to be obligated by 2024. However, we should have spent it all by 2026. On May 10th, the Treasury Department provided clear guidance as to how these dollars can be used. Everyone was essentially awaiting the interpretation of the legislation by the Treasury Department, and that is what we received on May 10th. It's been coined the interim final rule. Interim in the sense that they are gathering feedback, seeking lots of questions that other local jurisdictions, states, cities have around use of funds still, and then we'll be putting out some additional information about missing gaps, essentially, that are not currently in the guidance. I'll note that the guidance is not does not really share comprehensively what these dollars can be used for. They do provide anecdotes. The document is about 151 pages in total, so it's not a comprehensive list of uses or uses that are not allowed. Instead, it provides you with the framework of how to think about using these funds. The City of Minneapolis is set to receive a total of $271 million through the local fiscal recovery fund. And as of this date, we have received half of our allocation. So roughly 135, I think 0.5 technically, of our funds, and the remaining will get a year later. So in May of 2022 is when we expect to receive that other half. Before I move on to the next slide, I will pause and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Director. I believe Council Vice President had to step away and will be right back. We do have a question from Councilmember Cano, and I'll also note for the record that Councilmember Fletcher has joined the meeting. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you. Director Moore, could you or the budget staff member on the call here, Amelia, could you, either of you, speak a little bit more to the fill the revenue shortfalls part? If I'm understanding that correctly, that relates to the City of Minneapolis losing significant amounts of tax revenue over the last year and a half or so, relating to the pandemic and perhaps other issues related to the pandemic. Could you talk more about what that really means? Are there parameters to how much money would be used for filling revenue shortfalls? And is this explicitly to refund programs and initiatives that we had to cut or that we couldn't do? Anything that could give us a better understanding of what that means.
Councilmember Cano, I'll just say that we are planning to discuss that. There's a lot of detail in the guidance as well as some mysteries still left. So I think if it's all right, I will pass it back to Director Moore, and the topic of revenue loss is definitely covered in our presentation.
Great, thank you.
We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide then. Great, thank you. So again, the intention of the Fiscal Recovery Fund really are to provide four overarching supports. Definitely support the urgent COVID response, efforts to increase the virus spread and control the transmission. It is also intended to be used for replacing some revenue loss, both for the state, local territories, and tribal governments. And then to ensure that some of the really important public services, city services, continue to be rendered and that jobs are either brought back or maintained. It is also to support the immediate economic stabilization for households and businesses, and then to address the systemic public health and economic challenges that have been felt by, again, communities throughout our city. I'll go ahead and move to the next slide. And just give a high level information about what is coming into the state of Minnesota through these fiscal recovery funds as well. As Congresswoman Omar stated, the state is expected to receive approximately $2.8 billion. So that's going to the governor and the legislature for them to essentially figure out how they are going to be using these funds. I will note that $500 million is what was agreed upon by legislative leaders. So the governor, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Speaker of the House. That gives the governor discretion over $500 million of the $2.8 billion. So over the next couple weeks, as the legislature attempts to balance the state's biennial budget, the budget for the 2022 and 2023 fiscal year, the governor has a set aside amount of $500 million of the American Rescue Plan Act local recovery fund to utilize. In addition, Hennepin County also is receiving the direct funding as well. So they will be receiving about $245 million. And then the Minneapolis Public School also approximately $160 million to help, again, with some of those needs that were noted in the previous slide. Congresswoman Omar did note quite a few other pieces of legislation that are still in play at the federal government, and they are noted here, but I won't review them again. And instead, we'll go to the next slide that gives some more idea about eligible uses under the guidance from Treasury. So the eligible uses are bucketed into three different areas. First, public health, and as noted, this intention is to help contain the COVID-19 virus and address the public health needs as an impact of the pandemic. Additionally, it's to address the economic hardships that communities and businesses and families have experienced because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is also to address some of the revenue losses. So to Congress, to Councilmember Cano's question regarding revenue loss, it is intended to help provide public service, so you could assess your revenue loss to the extent of what your revenue loss was in previous years. And Director Amelia Kruger is going to go into more details about that. Additionally, it is to help with premium pay. So offering enhanced compensation for healthcare workers that really face dire financial risks because of both the work that they do and then the loss in jobs throughout the last year and a half. Lastly, there is a really narrow use of funds that could be used for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So again, to invest in some of the vital infrastructure needs that can help deliver clean water and then also improve access to broadband internet. We'll stay on this slide because as you look at the public health category here, the guidance also lays out a little bit more in depth additional information about how you could use these dollars to respond to the public health needs. So obviously, COVID-19 mitigation and containment is a really important use. The dollars could be used for things like vaccination, testing, additional contact tracing, and then prevention in key settings like nursing homes and schools as well. In addition to that, some of the medical expenses that could be covered with the use, things like providing care to for the short and long-term effects of the COVID-19. So as we're still understanding the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on an individual's long-term health, you could use some of these dollars to look at how you can either track or support some of those initiatives. The dollars can also be used for behavioral health care. So either things like new or enhanced services to meet the growing mental health needs, the growing substance abuse support, and then other kinds of behavioral health needs as an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic again. And then lastly, under the public health category, public health and safety staff. So ensuring that there is an emphasis on them as well, as they have been one of the frontline workers who have been helping to mitigate, slow and really stifle the spread of the pandemic. So some pandemic response, like staff costs, to the extent that folks are working on COVID-19 costs for public health and safety staff that have been primarily dedicated and responsible, could be used. Some of these funds can be used to help support them as well. And then I'll transition to the economic hardship piece, because there's a huge section of the guidance that really emphasizes equity, and it emphasizes racial equity. And there is a call out of qualified census tracts in the guidance, and it essentially says that there is a presumed eligibility under the guidance when funds are used in qualified census tracts. And those funds could be used for families, workers, small businesses, hardest hit industries, and can also be used to rehire public sector staff. So things like assistance with job and training for unemployed workers, assistance for food, housing, utility cost, again, internet access, for assistance for survivor benefits of family members who may have, for families who may have lost loved ones because of the COVID-19 pandemic. These are kind of the things that could be used. I'll pause there because I see Madam Chair, your camera's on, and then I believe there's a question as well.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Moore. So I wanted to acknowledge that we do have a question or a comment from Council President Bender, as well as we have been joined by Council Member Goodman. Council President Bender.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This may be redundant to the question that was asked earlier, but this seems like kind of a crux of the questions we'll be asking about this question of revenue loss and what's eligible for expenditures under that category. So we had a hiring freeze in place. Of course, then we adopted our 2021 budget, but our staffing levels are not back to what they used to be in many city departments, probably all city departments. So do you know the answer to this very direct question? Could we use these funds to hire back staff in any department within the city, regardless of the direct relationship between their work and something COVID related, simply because of revenue loss as a basis?
Council President Bender, I'm going to punt that over to Director Kruger to see if she can provide an answer.
Yes. Thank you, Director Moore and Council President Bender. That is a question I can answer. Very clearly in the guidance, it says bringing back staffing levels to 2019, bringing back staff to 2019 levels is authorized use of ARP dollars. And we've done a little bit of work to determine sort of what would that cost look like if we were to unfreeze all positions citywide using ARP dollars alone. I think that cost is a good ballpark number to start thinking about, would be around $30 million a year for unfreezing all the positions that we have held frozen to deal with our revenue loss.
Thank you. That is very helpful from an eligibility question. Obviously, then the next question is how long do we think the economic impacts of COVID will be in place? what do we think our tax levy is going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and what level of staffing do we think we can sustain beyond the pieces of, beyond this window of funding. So I just, as a policymaker, want to acknowledge that. I see you nodding as the person in charge of doing that 5-year planning. So thanks for answering that specific question.
If no other questions, I will continue. Again, looking at some of the equity focused services that could be provided under the local fiscal recovery fund. There was a recognition that the impact of COVID, and this is clearly stated in the guidance. Again, there are a lot of areas in which they really center racial equity in determining how you're using these funds. So there are a broad range of services that are eligible to address the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on communities. And again, some of those have been noted. So addressing some of the educational disparities. So the school board's going to be getting money as well, and how are these dollars being leveraged both from the school board and perhaps with the city investing in housing and neighborhoods like affordable housing, addressing some of the health disparities. For example, what's noted is providing things through the community health worker framework as well, to ensure that you are really targeting the individuals, communities, businesses, et cetera, that have the most need. Services are eligible when reaching, again, the disproportionately impacted communities, again, through the qualified census tract. So a presumption of eligibility when, now, as I say that, there are several questions that have been asked of the Treasury Department to provide additional clarity. So again, coming in July is when we expect some of these questions to be clarified more. But at the moment, this is still the framework that we have to work within. Moving on to premium pay for essential employees. Again, so from some examples of professions that could be eligible for premium pay are staffing at nursing homes and hospitals, workers at farms or food production facilities, grocery stores, food shelves, restaurants. Additionally, janitors, sanitation workers, transit staff, warehouse workers, childcare workers, providers, educators, after-school staff, regular school staff, and a lot of the other social services and human services staff as well are some of the distinct careers that and individuals that could be supported under the premium pay for essential workers. And with that, again, as I said, the broadband piece is very narrow. So, again, delivering clean water, and then a reliable broadband and internet access are one of those uses. I'll now go back up to the revenue loss piece, because the guidance states that recipients may use these funds to provide government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue experienced due to the COVID-19 health pandemic. And that's that sort of gray area that Director Kruger alluded to, that we still need to sort of suss out with the Treasury and understand exactly what markers they are using, how they're measuring it, so that we can ensure that we are in line with our interpretation as well. Revenue loss is calculated relative to the expected trend as well. So they go on to provide some additional guidance. Recipients may recalculate revenue loss at multiple points during the program, recognizing that revenue loss may occur with the lag as well. So again, like not a very clear guidance. There are a lot of gray areas as to how you can interpret what the interim rule ultimately says. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And lastly, I just want to note on what we know we cannot use these dollars for. These dollars And this was explicitly stated in the legislation, so we didn't even need to wait for Treasury to provide this to us, but no deposits can be made into pension funds. There were some things that took place with the CARES Act dollars that really raised the eyebrows of electeds nationally. And so they wanted to make sure that these dollars were not being held aside, but were really getting out into community to reignite economic growth, jobs, et cetera. These dollars can also not be used for legal settlements or judgments, and they cannot be put into rainy day funds or other forms of financial services. So with that, I believe the next slide will be Director Kruger.
Thank you. Perfect. So I'm going to just talk through a little bit about what we can take away from this guidance as it applies to Minneapolis. We've also, my staff in finance, as well as other folks in the city, have been participating in a lot of virtual convenings of national groups. So we've gotten to hear from folks at Treasury, as well as folks in the Biden administration, about what their intent was behind the guidance that they've released so far. And one key takeaway, I think, is the federal government wants to avoid the slow recovery that we saw in the last recession. And so their assumption is that local government austerity is what led to that slow recovery. They want to try and avoid that with this, which is why you'll see in a lot of guidance that explicitly encourages spending money rather than storing away for replenishing rainy day funds. Revenue loss, which is a hot topic. So they provide some specifics around how to calculate that revenue loss. And one thing that is different than we had been looking at it before is they're asking cities to take a look at what your revenue was in 2020 and compare that not just to what it was in 2019 pre-pandemic, but to what a reasonable growth rate would have been had we not had a global recession related to the pandemic. So they give a couple ways to measure that. If we're using an average 4% increase, the city has a revenue loss of around $160 million. They also provide for using a city-specific growth rate, which would take into account the last 3 years of revenue. And the revenue that we're using is also dictated in the guidance. They're really looking at city-specific revenue. So they're excluding federal funds, they're excluding state grants, they're also excluding utility funds. So we're really just looking at sort of what revenue do we pull in for core city services? And in Minneapolis, because we've had several years of solid growth in our permits, our fees, our licensing, as well as our property taxes, when we use a Minneapolis specific rate of increase, the revenue loss that we can show to date is equal to about the allocation that we expect to get, $271 million. So that was really revealing in the guidelines that we got. What is still a mystery is exactly how much flexibility we have for revenue loss spending. So in the guidance, general government services is pretty much as detailed as we get about what we can use and count towards revenue loss. Staffing is explicitly called out as okay, but questions still exist around, does this need to be something that we would have spent the dollars on before? Does this need to be things we already spend money on? Or can we truly spend this on new projects, new initiatives that might not be tied directly to COVID-19? We're hoping that the federal government can provide more clarity around that because it's not there right now. And I will just reiterate quickly, because Director Moore did a great job emphasizing there's many points in this guidance that really shines a light on it, an equity lens when deciding how to spend these dollars. There's more flexibility when you're aiming these programs at low-income census tracts. There's also additional scrutiny applied for the premium pay for those that are making above sort of 150% of the median wage. They're really encouraging looking at low and medium wage workers for premium pay. So that was something that was just much clearer in the guidance that was released recently. Spending that is explicitly prohibited, just as Director Moore stated, filling reserves or rainy day funds. So in Minneapolis, we did use cash balances to make it through 2020. And so we will not be able to simply put that money back in the bank. There's lots that we can use the money on. And so, we will have more conversations about what's the best way to spend these dollars to restore our city's financial health. Spending on debt service is also explicitly prohibited, and legal settlements. And then the last point I'll make is that with the interim final rule, that comes with a 60-day comment period. So in the guidance, the Treasury Department has explicitly asked questions of folks. They're soliciting comments and feedback. And so at the end of 60 days, which will be, I think, middle of July, they will be responding to those, to some of those questions and offering further clarification. So that will likely happen probably sometime in August. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So I just want to call out some of the challenges this presents. There is a tension between getting money quickly out the door to address urgent needs and doing more extensive public engagement, as well as aligning resources with those other jurisdictions that are getting a sizable amount of money from this legislation too. So to the extent that we want to partner with MPS or with the county or with the state, that decision-making process is likely going to happen later in the year. So the more time we take to decide, the more opportunities there might be to partner with our neighboring jurisdictions. Ongoing spending. So Council President Bender brought up a great point about when we are using federal dollars on bringing back staff, which is explicitly allowed. We need to make sure we're doing it in a sustainable way, and we're understanding what our revenues will look like in 2025, making sure we're not setting ourselves up for a fiscal cliff that would require a large increase in revenues in 2025 or a sharp decrease in spending. So some of the work that my team is doing right now around the 2022 budget is going to be taking a look at what those revenues, what a solid projection for revenues looks like over the next 5 years. And then just to reiterate, we will be getting additional detail and guidance mid to late summer this year that will help us answer, give more definition to the gray areas that we've brought up today. And then just the last is the logistical piece. The dollars are coming. We've been assured that there won't be a change in the total amount, but they are coming in 2 chunks. So we only have 135.5 of the total 271 right now. We'll get the rest of it a year from now. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'll talk a little bit about the work that's been happening to date.
I'm sorry, Ms. Culver, can you just restate that first amount? It seems different from what I've heard in earlier presentations.
Sure. So the total amount the city of Minneapolis is going to receive is
271.
271. So we have 135.5 million now. That's the first tranche, and then we'll get that same amount next year in May.
Thank you.
So some of the work that's happened already at the city. So back in February, we organized working groups with folks that are addressing subject matter experts that are really working in the city's programs that address specific needs that could be addressed through funding around ARP. And so those groups have focused on housing and homelessness, economic rebuilding, public health and climate, public safety, as well as city capacity and performance. And so those cross-department groups have been working to just generate proposal ideas for the ARP process. We've also shared those proposals and gotten feedback from other stakeholder groups, employee resource groups, labor partners, as well as a preliminary sort of outreach to council members. Additional proposals and feedback from department heads has also been sought. We've asked for departments to review what's in the really generative list that we've created and provide their feedback on priorities. And right now that we have that specific guidance, finance is looking at proposals and vetting them against the guidance that we have, and we're able to use some of the expertise in our federal grants team to do that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So the process as it stands now, in an attempt to address some of those challenges, is to do decision making in 2 phases. And so for each phase of decision making, we'll use the same process that we do when we make decisions around the annual budget, where the mayor will make a recommendation and then council will amend and adopt. And so the idea is to, in the first phase, peel off a smaller amount of the total dollars allocated and focus it on urgent needs in the city right now, so that money can get out the door to address, to start moving out into the community this summer. And so that would be phase 1. After phase 1 is complete, we will sort of do a pivot back to working on the mayor's recommended 2022 budget and really refining those revenue estimates so that we can have a good sense of where we will be on a 5-year outlook. Then after that comes out in August, we can focus again on the majority of the dollars in the fall and winter, and decision making around the remainder of the ARP dollars that Minneapolis will get. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So right now, I know there's some work being done to finalize the council amendment process and those dates. I think over the summer, there is an opportunity to do further community engagement. And then in phase 2, we're still sort of working out what is a good process for dealing with the majority of these funds. How do we make sure that we're spending ongoing money in a sustainable way? And how are we working with our partners? So with that, I will pause for any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Are there questions? Council President Bender.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I thought perhaps I should chime in here about the process side, and thanks for the great presentation from staff. So we had initially heard that the mayor's proposal would likely be ready in mid-June. And together with Ms. Kruger and the clerk's office, I had been working with some of the chairs to talk about a process that could come to council, assuming that mid-June presentation date by the mayor. Just on Friday, the mayor's office reached out to let us know that they will likely be sending a proposal late next week, perhaps electronically, to council members, and with a request to have about a 3-week process for council approval. I've tried to be honest, and this may be something for all of you to consider who may plan to volunteer for this role next term. My office with my 2 staff who also serve Ward 10, I have offered and I'm very happy and willing to chair any special meetings that are needed, to attend those, to participate in them, to do the extra work of chairing them. My 2 staff and I are not able to, facilitate the scheduling of a bunch of extra meetings with 12 council offices. We just don't have that administrative capacity in my office. So if the clerk or finance or the mayor's office have that capacity, we may be able to move more quickly than simply trying to rely on my office with its 2 staff. I don't know what's in the mayor's proposal, and I look forward to seeing it. I have also just tried to be honest with the mayor's office that my office and the 3 of us do not have capacity to answer all of the questions from public and press and the 13 council office, the other 12 council offices through my office, so that as long as the mayor's office has capacity to talk and meet with council members, depending on the availability of department heads and subject matter experts and finance staff to share what's in the mayor's proposal and answer questions again from the public and council offices, work on any amendments that may come through the council offices. It has been my recommendation that we all just really be honest about the capacity of the mayor's office, the finance department, the clerk's office to really support and facilitate that process. And my office always ends up, stepping in and helping support the council side and the council office. But I do just need to be honest about our capacity, and we do not have the capacity in my office to, take the lead on scheduling special council meetings, take the lead on shepherding this through the process, answering substantive questions about the mayor's proposal. So that is kind of the status of the conversations, just recognizing that a 3-week process. So the council being asked to adopt a proposal 3 weeks after being emailed the details from the mayor's office does seem a bit quick to me, and very dependent on the capacity of the mayor's office, finance, and the departments to be able to provide very rapid information, particularly because there has not been any public-facing engagement. So it may be that the proposals are drawing on past engagement, and that there would be information from department heads or others to help us understand how these proposals have come together. But the kind of meat of the public facing side would come through the council's process in our communications with our constituents, as well as any public hearings that we would schedule as part of this ARPA budget. So that I'm happy to answer questions. And I don't know who else is here, from the clerk's office for the logistics side and those kinds of things. So I guess I would end by just providing that final sort of heads up that sounds like the mayor's office will be sending a proposal late next week. It sounds like council members may need to try to be flexible in June to schedule some special meetings through the clerk's office, as far as I understand, who would be taking the lead on those scheduling and logistics issues. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, CP Bender. Are there any other comments or questions? Council Member Schrader.
Sure. I just appreciate the council president kind of filling us in on kind of the status of that. I don't know if there's someone from the mayor's office, because it seems very dependent on what their plan is for rolling this out, and especially what part of public input they'll be gathering. So I don't know if this is the right time to see if we could hear back from the mayor's office on how their plan will be kind of rolled out and seeking public input, or if that will come at a future meeting.
Thank you, Council Member. Is there anyone from the mayor's office able to speak to that question/comment? I don't think so, Councilmember Schrader, but certainly that that inquiry is noted.
Thank you. And I think also, oh, sure. Just thank you for indulging me on that. I think also one of the questions would just be why a 3-week process when the council cycle is 2 weeks. So I understand and completely encourage moving as quick as we can with these dollars. But I think just the more the council can know, the more we can be prepared to move quickly.
Great. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to offer my interest and ability to partner if others don't have capacity. I was part of a conversation with the mayor's office and Councilmember Ellison yesterday to discuss, how that timing and how that process would work. He's not, I don't know if Councilmember Ellison would want to talk about that, because these things seem like they will end up being transacted mostly through his committee. But I want to remind my colleagues that we did this last year with the COVID budget. I think we can do this. I see it as our job to get relief money out the door as quickly as possible. And we do have experience doing exactly this when necessary. So I am hopeful that we can start this process, and I'm eager to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Palmisano. Are there any other questions or comments or volunteers to help support this really rapid process? Council President Bender?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I do think as staff and all who've spoken have highlighted this tension. I do just want to note, and I don't know if staff has any more detail than I do. I've reached out to the county board. As of a few days ago, they had not set their process or timeline, partly because we had to rely so much on the county during the CARES Act process. For better or for worse, we've developed a very close relationship with the county in recovery, and I think it will be helpful to understand from Chair Green and her colleagues, and then of course at the staff level as well, how we may coordinate and leverage the funds in ARPA. So it will be helpful, I think, to hear from her. And I assume again that those conversations are also happening at the administrative level, what their timeline looks like and how those decisions might be made in coordination. I appreciated Dr. Moore's emphasis on the recovery as far as both the guidance and our own city goals around equity. And I think that we know that urgency is one of the markers of a culture of white supremacy. And so I think that we have to be just really careful when we are operating within systems that are designed and for so many years to really benefit, perpetuating, thank you, perpetuating white supremacy and perpetuating privilege, that we just really do have to balance our goals with our process. And again, I think a 4-week process is also very quick for a community who is hurting and devastated to engage. I'm not sure how much 5 business days really affects our ability to meet our goals or not. So I think for us to really be clear and intentional about how we are engaging with those communities that are intended to be the focus of this work. And I think we all need to really lean on and look at to our colleagues who are representing parts of the city where this funding will be, I think, most needed and most focused. And I want to offer to just really hear from you about what will work best to communicate with and hear from communities who don't speak English as a first language or who have been through a lot of turmoil this year, and how are we striking that right balance of absolutely getting needed support and funding out the door to communities that are hurting. No one would disagree with that value, and also making sure that we're using the funds in the best way possible. So that's to all of us, but I think in particular to really focus in on how we can best have a process that meets our values and goals. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilmember Cunningham, are you in queue? Did you want to speak, or are you just sharing information? If you're speaking, you're on mute.
Yes, my apologies. I just wanted to share, Council Vice President spoke of different characteristics of white supremacy culture, and so I just shared a link for folks, and I can share it verbally, which is showingup.org/white-supremacy-culture-characteristics. I do think it's a very good resource for folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cunningham. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Council Vice President. I just wanted to echo what I think a lot of my colleagues are saying. I know all of us are working to try to be able to move with urgency. I've scheduled meetings in my ward to try to hear from people about what their priorities are and make sure that we have an opportunity for there to be community feedback and community engagement as a part of this process. I know others are doing the same. It is hard because, as we heard in the presentation today, which was very helpful, by the way, there are still aspects of this that we're still seeking guidance on. So we can't fully put the question to community in an accurate way, as we're simultaneously still trying to find out what the question is about how we're able to use this and what the constraints are on the process. So this is a moving target. I know that we're all moving with purpose and clarity about the need to get this out with some efficiency. I do think that this is a very, very short timeline for people to be able to make that response. And I think it's important for us as the representatives of the small geographic units who can bring our local perspectives to this conversation to stand up for community engagement as a part of this process and to make sure that our constituents do get a chance to weigh in. So I think it's very important, just want to echo that that's going to be the lens through which I'm viewing proposed timelines on this, is to make sure that we actually do get a chance to hear from the public, to hear from our constituents, to make sure that we're getting feedback about what the right ideas are, because I think there's an awful lot of flexibility that we have and an awful lot of need, and making sure that we match that up in the right way and really get this right and get the opportunity of this funding right should be and is a huge priority of the city right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. Are there other comments or questions? Seeing none, and seeing no more discussion, I really want to thank Ms. Kruger and Director Moore for this presentation, and all of my colleagues for your very strong commitment to ensuring that we have a fair and equitable process to the distributions of these really critical funds. And we do have a lot of work ahead of us, and I think we need to do it in the most fair and equitable way possible, and really try to meet the goals of not delaying the recovery to the extent possible. And so, seeing no further discussion, I will now direct the clerk to file that report. And then next we have the reports of our standing committees for matters to be considered at the full council this coming Friday. And that first committee report is the Business Inspections, Housing and Zoning Committee, which will be presented by the chair, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilmember Schrader is going to be presenting the report this morning, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. So this committee will be bringing forward 15 items for approval on Friday. The first is a passage of a resolution for a property assessment for the clean energy. This is the PACE financing. The second is an passage approving an interim use permit at 4040 Washington and also 4050 and a half Washington Avenue North. The third is the approving of an application for at 4953 Xerxes Avenue South for on-sale liquor sales with Sunday and no live entertainment. Number 4 is the considering renter eviction protection ordinance. This is being sent forward without recommendation. And also I'll note to my colleagues to please read the email we received from the city attorney. Number 5 is the granting of a variance at 4933 32nd Avenue South. Number 6 is the denying of an appeal on behalf of, it's at 916 26th Avenue. Number 7 is the liquor license approvals. Number 8 is also the liquor license renewals. Number 9 is the gambling approvals. Number 10 is the adopting of the Great Streets Facade Improvement Matching Grant Program. Number 11 is authorizing a contract with Neighborhood Works Home Partners and Build Wealth Minnesota. Number 12 is the approving of a technical amendment to the program guidelines for George Floyd Square and 38th and Chicago forgivable loan program. Number 13 is the approving of a rezoning at 200 Plymouth, and also 1506 and 1512 West Broadway. Number 14 is the approving of the 2021 Affordable Housing Trust Fund Program policies and procedures. Number 15 is the approving of the year 2022 through 2023 Housing Tax Credit Program Qualifying Allocation Plan. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Schrader. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Saying none, the next committee.
I have a comment I'd like to make. I'm not.
My apologies, Councilmember Gordon. I did not see your name in the chat, so.
Sorry about that.
Please.
I just wanted to make a comment on 4. This was the renter protections ordinance. It's really the fair notice. I moved it forward without recommendation. I think it would have passed unanimously, but we heard at the public hearing a lot of people thinking the 14-day notice was not adequate. We've also had some communications from that since. We discussed at the committee moving that to 30 days, 21 days, 24 days. In consultation with my co-authors so far, I think we are settled on moving it as 30 days. So folks can be prepared for an amendment. And I think we'll continue having our conversations the rest of the day before tomorrow, but I wanted to just give you a heads up that my intention at this point is to move it forward for approval with an amendment to increase the notice from 14 to 30 days.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. The next report then is the Policy Government Oversight Committee report, and it will be given by the Vice Chair, Council Member Fletcher.
Thank you, Council Vice President. The POGO Committee is bringing forward 17 items for consideration at Council on Friday. Item number 1 is creating the appointed position in the City Coordinator's Office of Service Center Director. Item number 2 is an appointed position in the City Coordinator's Office, Race and Equity Director. Item number 3 is click appointments. Item number 4 is gift acceptance from the Poled Foundation, McKnight Foundation, Minneapolis Foundation, and Joyce Foundation to support transforming public safety work in the Coordinator's Office. Legal settlement, items number 5 and 6 are both legal settlements, and then items 7 through 17 are contract amendments related to the public service building. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Seeing none, the next committee report is the Public Health and Safety Committee, given by its chair, Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Public Health and Safety Committee is bringing forward 8 items for approval. Item number 1 is passage of a resolution establishing a new Northern Meadow Settlement Advisory Board that will advise the mayor and council on how we should use the settlement funds dedicated to community asthma and lead reduction. Item number 2 is accepting a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health for almost $200,000 for enhanced blood lead testing, lead poisoning prevention efforts in asthma education. Item number 3 is authorizing a grant from Hennepin County for around $250,000 to support, it's the Justice Assistance Grant, JAG, for the police department and city attorney's office. Item number 4 is authorizing a contract with the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust for patrol, a peace officer accredited training online subscription. Item number 5 is authorizing master contracts with Planned Parenthood of Minnesota and the Domestic Abuse Project as eligible providers. Item number 6 is authorizing the submittal of a grant application to the CDC for $4 million to address COVID-19 health disparities among high-risk and underserved populations. Item number 4 is accepting reimbursement dollars for $181,649 for a set of partner organizations, which can be found on the agenda. Item number 8 is accepting a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health in the amount of $413,153 for prevention of opioid use among youth. And I am happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Cunningham. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the Transportation and Public Works Committee. And that report will be given by the chair, Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The committee forwards 12 items. Items 1 and 2 are agreements to continue work of the department. Item 3 is the Whittier International Elementary School Safe Routes to School project. 4 is the 88th Street, Southeast Street reconstruction, street lighting, and rescinding previous actions as listed. 5, 6, and 5 and 6 are both grant applications for work of the department. 7 is the George Floyd Remembrance Block Event Permit for May 25th. 8 is the bid for rental. Well, actually 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are all bids for activities of the department. I'll stand for questions, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Chair Reich. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Seeing none, the next committee is the Audit Committee report given by the Chair, Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Audit Committee met on May 17th of this cycle. There's nothing that will be forwarded to the City Council as a result of it. Just to mention what happened there. Regular minutes of our February meeting, the new business that we received, filed, and published a report was a Minneapolis Police Department DVS driver and vehicle systems access and breach investigations audit. This was something that we were asked to do by way of a civil case that we were involved in, and out of it, our auditor was able to report that we have a fairly clean bill of health in this department. There was one issue or recommendation that was resolved before the end of the audit. So we have a good documented process in place here. Other than that, we heard the report of the internal auditor on all the different competing priorities and some of the projects that he'd like to get done by the end of the year and beyond. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but we won't be bringing any of these forward for review at the council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? The next committee report then is the Executive Committee, and that report will be given by the Vice Chair, Council President Bender.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We just have one item from the Executive Committee. It will be referred to POGO, and it's an appointed position in the in the City Coordinator's office, and the position is the Human Resources Department Director for HR Internal Workplace Investigations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And with that, we have concluded all business to come before this committee today. And hearing no objections, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone, to all our presenters. Thanks to Congresswoman Omar, as well as Ms. Young for the update on the minimum wage process, and Ms. Kromer and Ms. Moore for the report on the ARPA funds. And thank you, Council President, for giving us insight into the process from your perspective. Have a great day, everyone.